What's up, guys? The Market is Revived podcast. Welcome to episode 1, guys. Joe Cruz here. It's such a pleasure to have a special guest today on our first episode. Elysa Berlin, welcome on the show, baby. Let's go.
Hi, Joe.
What up?
Thanks for that lovely introduction.
Yeah, so we launched Revived Residential, my partner Lou Belisario and I, about a month and a half ago. And just recently, we launched Revived Commercial, a commercial division within our firm. And we're excited that you're going to be spearheading this commercial division. Who better than you, an industry legend? We had our back and forths about that because legend or industry leader, right?
I don't like the spotlight, but Joe's, is bringing me out of retirement over here. He's making me, come back into the business. No, I'm just kidding. I've been in the business a really long time.
How long?
Oh, since I'm 23 years old. I know I only look 28, but no. Long time. 15, 16 years now. So I know it's been great. I love real estate. I love commercial real estate. I'm so excited to be on board with you guys, and we have a lot of exciting new things to do. Love talking about the market. So I'm looking forward to this today.
So this episode is going to be really interesting because we're going to jump right into commercial real estate. What's commercial real estate? What's different between residential and commercial? The state of the market, and a lot of fun, interesting stuff. We're not going to make it long and boring. It's going to be short, but very great content and a lot of learning for anyone out there that wants to learn about commercial real estate. Elysa, what is commercial real estate as opposed to residential, really?
Sure. Well, commercial real estate is a few different things. It's different types of assets. So it's commercial buildings, multifamily buildings, industrial warehouses, land, anything that's pretty much not a single family house. So there's a lot of commercial real estate in New York City, especially in Brooklyn. And there's a lot of very interesting things happening in the market right now. So, yeah, I'm excited to talk about it.
Talking about land, I just want to give a shout out to you because we just secured. Tell us about the new listing.
Sure. So we just got hired to sell roughly 56,000 buildable square foot development site in prime Prospect Heights for a client of mine from a long time ago. And
how much?
So we're asking $16.25 million, which
That's
is
it. That's it.
It comes out to about $290 a buildable square foot, which we think for a site over there in that market is competitive, given the fact that condominium sales over there in Prospect Heights are like close to 400.
All right, I'll buy it. Hold up, I got 16 million over here. Let me just get it for you. Hold up.
Yeah,
you mentioned buildable square feet. So for anyone listening, I want you to tell us, what is buildable square feet? 55,000 buildable square feet. What does that mean?
So that means that's how you value land. So there's many different aspects on how you value commercial buildings, but when you sell land, it's valued based upon price per buildable square foot. So you have 55,000 square feet and your asking price is 16 million. Well, round numbers for say, okay. You take the 16 million and you divide the 55,000 into it and you get roughly about 280 approximately per dollars per buildable square foot. So it's each square footage that you buy, that's the price for it. So
gotcha. So if there is a property, a land, and you have, for example, 25 by 100 feet, right? That's the size of the property. Now that is a 2,500 square foot property. If the air rights, the FAR, which stands for floor to air ratio, is say 3. So now 2,500 square feet times 3, because that's the FAR, that would give you right around 7,500 buildable square feet. And if you're asking $100 a foot, that means that property would sell for 750,000. Just some simple little math. That's good. All right, listen, that's a good start, right? Let's talk about buildings and cap rates. Cap rates, all right? Some people are like, what the hell is cap rate? What is a cap rate in a building?
So a cap rate, a capitalization rate is just one way we value commercial property. So think about it as what's the return that you want on your investment? So that's what a cap rate is. So if you're looking at a 5% or 6% return, when they say the cap rate on a building, the current cap rate on a building is 6%, that's the annual return that you're going to receive based upon the income that the property produces annually. So, for example, if you have a building that they're asking say they're asking for the property is $2 million, they're asking $2 million, and the net income is $100,000 a year, and you want a return of a 5%. That's how they're kind of getting to the listing price. If you want a 6% return on your $100,000 a year, you're only going to pay say 180, say 1.8 million or 1.7 million. So the higher the cap rate that you're looking for, the lower the sales price. Okay.
So basically, a cap rate, in other words, is like a return on investment.
Yeah.
So if I invest $1 million in cash into a building, say there's 10, 12, or 15 units, doesn't matter. If I invest $1 million and the cap rate is 5%, my return on investment after expenses is 5%.
Correct. You're making $50,000 a year. So if you pay $1 million and you're getting a 5% return on your money, you're collecting $50,000 in net income, something like that. I mean,
Got it. So now you mentioned net income.
Yeah.
So I want to get into that.
Okay.
So what is gross and net income? Because a lot of times I see rookie investors looking at the gross instead of the net, and then they get into trouble. So tell us about that.
Right. So actually, it's funny because there are a lot of old school investors, old school guys that buy on what's called gross income. It's a gross rent multiple, which is just looking at what the income the property produces on an annual basis, not regarding expenses. So not taking out the taxes, insurance, utilities. It's just your gross rent multiple. And if you're a lot of guys, like old school Brooklyn guys, would be like, I'll give you 10 times the rent. So if you're looking at a building that makes $100,000 a year gross, they say, I'll give you 10 times the rent. That means I'll give you $1 million in 10 years. I look like I have my money back, right? Because the building's making me $100,000 a year gross. In 10 years, I want my money back.
Right.
If you're looking at a net income basis, which is mostly how like larger investments, mixed use buildings are derived from, it's basically you take your gross income minus your expenses, you get to your net operating income. So your net operating income is what your capitalization rate is then used to get to a building value on. So
you basically take, if there's 10 apartments here, right? Well, let's set up an example scenario, 10 apartments, and each apartment is paying $1,000 rent. So your rent row is $10,000 a month. That is your gross. You multiply that by 12. Now you have $120,000 gross income. Now you take all your expenses like taxes, insurance, maintenance, vacancy rates, and all that stuff, and you deduct it, and you arrive at your net operating income. And that's the number that matters when you're dividing that net income into the purchase price or acquisitions price, and that's how you get your cap rate.
Correct. So rule of thumb is, so it kind of depends on what the asset is that you're looking at. An expense ratio should be anywhere from like 25 to 35% based upon the asset class. So like smaller mixed use buildings, when you have the retail downstairs, like the retail tenant usually picks up like most of the water, the utilities, piece of the taxes. So maybe your expenses are more minimal on that property. Heavily, like buildings that are heavily rent stabilized, multifamily buildings.
Stabilized.
Yeah, that's a whole other topic. Those run more heavy on expenses because you're carrying all the utility costs, the heating costs, your taxes have gone up. Depends. New York City works very different than the rest of 49 states, especially when it comes to tax class, how buildings are taxed. But basically, if you have a healthy building, when you look at an asset, you say an asset that's like a healthy asset, your expenses should be anywhere from like probably 25 to 35%. And a net income does not take into consideration any debt, any leverage. So this is all before you're going to get a mortgage. So this is a non-leveraged return.
Absolutely. That's looking at if you're purchasing acquiring cash, all cash, which is interesting. A lot of people don't acquire all cash, for instance. And the way to look at for me, at least, when I'm looking at a property, if I'm considering purchasing, say, a 6-unit building or a 4-unit property, something smaller, right? Not on a big scale. I look at it as after my initial investment, what's going to be my mortgage payment plus my expenses as in insurance, taxes, and what's my monthly expense, including my mortgage payment. And then I compare that to my net income on a monthly basis, and I see what my positive cash flow is. And if I'm not positive cash flowing and having money to put away for a reserve, then I'm not buying that asset. I'm not buying that property, right? We mentioned rent stabilize. New York City landlords, all right? Sit down. This is the time we talk about it. What is rent stabilize? Let's talk about that, and let's talk about the recent New York City rent laws and why some landlords are just, they want to jump off a bridge right now. They want to, they're crying, and there's a lot going on. So what is rent stabilize?
I mean, rent stabilization is like the freaking girlfriend you wish you could have gotten rid of 10 fucking years ago, but she just will not leave you alone, and she just keeps coming back.
She just keeps coming
keeps coming back, like with a vengeance. Like, it's just driving you more and more crazy to the point where you're like, that's fine, just take my house, take my keys, take my Bentley, take everything I worked for my entire life. Just
it's all yours.
The fuck alone. That's the best way I can explain rent stabilization in New York City. It's just unfortunate because rent stabilization and the laws were put in place, as an emergency act, back in, originally in the 1940s, during World War II, when people came home, it was an emergency act that was rent controlled. That's when rent control started. And then, in the 70s, like any building prior to 1974, if it was 6 units or more, was then subject to rent stabilization, which was, again, an emergency act. Just an emergency to, help people get on their feet. And it just ended up, sticking. And
for
now,
84 years now?
Yeah, it's been an emergency for 84 years. Yeah. So, and it's gotten worse and worse over time because there's a very big disconnect in the market for the benefits that originally rent stabilization and rent control were supposed to do for the people, and now really kind of what it is and the lasting impact these current laws back in 2019 have had for building owners, which kind of just don't make any sense and just painted every single landlord with a bad brush as if, this should just been a sweeping legislation that everybody should swallow. And what they really don't understand is when you create one law that's a bad law, it has a ripple effect on the economy. So
what were the laws in 2019 that really came out in New York City that are affecting landlords, for example?
Not only landlords is it affecting, it's affecting small businesses, supers, anyone with a small construction business. There's been a ripple effect that I think has been not really highlighted.
Okay.
That it needs to be, because sometimes things take time to really show the true impact. So in 2019, they passed the Protection Act, and one of the sweeping legislations was about the vacancy with rent stabilized apartments. So it used to be if you had a rent stabilized apartment and it became vacant, there were guidelines. Remember, this was a regulated industry, so there were already regulations on what landlords were able to do when you had vacant apartments. But considering there's such a housing supply shortage in the market to begin with, big
shortage in the market for inventory.
So when you got a rent stabilized apartment back due to vacancy, just vacancy, not like, oh, you didn't offer them a renewal or anything. You just got the apartment back. They left, right? They moved out. And you were able to renovate that unit, increase the rent through guidelines. And most of the time, these units needed $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 in renovations. They hadn't been touched in 20, 30, 50 years. So you had, contractors, Cruz, supers that did all this work. And if an apartment was, renting, the prior legal rent was, $1,000 or $1,200, you fixed it up, you put the money back in it. Now you put it on the market for $1,800, $2,000, which was whatever the legal rent was you can charge after the renovation. And there's a formula for this, which I don't need to.
So you're not allowed to do that anymore?
So that was a healthy thing. That was a healthy thing for the market. That was a healthy thing for the the supply for New York City, because most of these units were still renting for under what the market value was. So people were still being able to afford units, but at least landlords were able to recoup some of their money. Now, in 2019, they said, no, you're beat. You're beat. That person moves out. That apartment stays at the last legal rent. There's no means.
Even if you renovate.
You can't, even if you renovate, it doesn't matter. The most you can get is like $90 more. Like you can spend $15,000 and get $90 more a month or something like that. It's some de minimis number.
So basically, this law in 2019 has taken away the motivation for landlords that get a vacant rent stabilized unit from renovating it, because they're not going to be able to recoup their money by raising the rent any longer. And that has also caused contractors not to get these jobs and small businesses that supply contractors and materials and all that. It's a ripple effect, like you said. It's crazy.
No one really highlights that, right? They're just like, oh, screw the big landlord, but and it's like doesn't really work like that. Like everyday people like that have small businesses that relied on getting, renovating these units, or even if you had a window company, you had a small, an AC company, heating company, you would do these work in these buildings and they've seen their businesses demolished. And that's not what I think, these laws were intended to do, right? There was just this sweeping legislation that said you can't do that. And that was supposed to help who? This was not helping anybody. And instead it's hurt so many more people. And it's not really talked about. And that's why I think we should highlight it.
What's crazy is that they were what they were really trying to do is say, by doing this law, we're going to avoid rents from being raised. But it did the whole opposite. Correct. Because now that landlords cannot they don't want to renovate because they're not going to get their money back and increase the rent by a little bit. Now there's a shortage of inventory in the market. And the laws of economics. When the supply is up and the demand is down, the prices go right up. And so some landlords, interesting enough, you mentioned this in one of our team meetings, are choosing to just leave their apartments empty and not even rent it because it's not worth it.
Right, because if your expenses on your unit are like $1,200, $1,300 a month between the real estate taxes, like that's another way we look at the health of an asset, right? It's like, what's your monthly, expense on a unit? If it's costing me $1,000 or $1,100 a month to run a unit between my taxes, my insurance, my utilities, and my legal rent is stuck at $800, what am I going to do? I'm gonna lose money. So I can't put that unit on the market. And this is another thing that's like such a weird like disconnect of like New York City, which I'm like boggles the mind. Okay. Is that you have in every zip code, affordable housing voucher programs, right? And each zip code gets a 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom, whatever you can charge. And it could be $2,500, it could be $3,000, it could be $3,300. And the city, wants to encourage landlords, to take these affordable housing vouchers because, they have a shortage of housing. So it's like you're willing to give a monthly voucher of say $2,500 for a 1-bedroom. But now I have a 1-bedroom that's rent stabilized that my last legal rent was $850 on. And I can't rent it to her or whoever with a voucher because
the legal rent.
Your legal rent is at $800. They have a voucher for $2,500. At least let me fix it up. And then I'll take the voucher. You can't move into the condition of what it is. So now it's like people are scrambling to try to find units when there's probably like 1,400 or 1,500 apartments that are being just like left vacant, warehouse. Do you know how many people we could house?
So there's a ton of inventory by landlords just being held because what they could really rent it for is not even worth it based on their taxes, insurance, and other expenses. They would lose money if they rent it at the legal rent. So they're holding out. That's inventory that is not hitting the market. They're just vacant apartments and the inventory is at an all-time low. And that's driving prices to go up, which is the exact opposite of what this law in 2019 was intended to do, which is crazy to me. Now, I want to just spin it a little bit to something else. How about all these commercial buildings and loans and tell us about what's going on with that situation and commercial loans and how they're for a certain period of time and they're coming due for in some cases and what that causes in the market. Tell us a little bit about that.
So for those who were around like during the Great Recession and the credit crisis in New York City, back in 08, 09, 010, there was definitely
fun times.
Very fun times. Listen, I lived through that, so I've seen a cycle or two. And so the commercial debt market is most of the time short term. So it's either 3, 5, or 7 years.
So if you get a commercial loan, is only for a short period of time usually.
Yeah, it depends. Like typically commercial loans go for like anywhere 3 years, 5 years, 7 years. And after that, they look to refi, or you have a fixed rate and then it goes to a variable rate. There's a lot of different things. So when there's the problem in New York City is twofold. The problem is that you have all of these assets that have been devalued greatly by the rent rules that were put in 2019. But all of these buildings that had debt on them or that were purchased prior to 2019, all were underwritten under the prior guidelines. So they were all underwritten with upside. So if you had a multifamily building in like prime Brooklyn Heights, and you had, rent stabilized tenants and some free market tenants in the building, and you bought that at like a sub 4 cap, right? Because you're like, this building's great. Some of the units turn over. I'm going to increase my rents and I'm going to end up getting to a 6 or a 7% return. And I have a mortgage now that it's 3.5% because interest rates were, low at the time. So you bought a building for pretty much the same return as what your debt was, or maybe only 50 basis points higher based upon you renovating that building, putting money back into it. And then hopefully when you went for your refi, say if you bought it in 17 or 18, you're looking at going for a refi like now, or you were punting it down the road.
The note due now?
So the note's like kind of due now, or you got an extension because of COVID. You got some extensions where you could punt it a little bit.
Oh my God. I promise you, this is not vodka. This is water. So
it's
I'm
like
just gonna take a little drink.
So now you're like, all right, so I bought this building. It was beautiful. And now my debt's coming due. My lender's like, well, your loan is pretty much what your assets worth now. So if I bought the building for $3 million and I had a $2 million note on it, and I'm not considered over leveraged. I was only 65% leveraged when I bought it. So I had 35% of my money
because there was upside.
Because there was upside. So now
no longer after 2019.
My loan's coming due. My lender's like, yeah, well, your building's only worth like $2 million and your note's for $2 million. And I'm only going to give you 50% leverage. You got to write me a check for $1 million.
So what does that do to the market now when these loans are coming?
Well, I don't want to say it was kind of fucked, but I mean, listen,
people will be and are in trouble.
They are. I mean, I haven't seen the distress that I think people have thought they were going to see, because I think, there has been like some extended pretend, and given the fact that interest rates rose so quickly, over the last year. And I think that, they're trying to negotiate with the banks. They're trying not to have such a mass exodus of distressed debt in the market. And again, if anybody ever watched the movie The Big Short, which, I recommend, and too bad Marco Robbie wasn't here in the bathtub trying to explain this, but, it's like, why isn't it happening yet? Like, remember, like Michael Berry's like, I don't understand. Like, why is it not falling in yet? Like, why is this not happening yet? And like, sometimes like the other powers that be are like, we're just going to prop this up a little bit more and we're going to extend and pretend. And it takes a very long time to like, commence a foreclosure action. And, I just think that it's going to happen. I'm surprised that it's not been happening quicker. But there's also a lot of landlords that said, you know what, like, I'm not over leveraged. If I have to put some equity in, I will, or we're just going to effectuate a sale and we've owned the asset for a very long time. And, it's not worth as what it was, when we bought it, but we're still in the money. So I think that there's definitely going to be more inventory hitting the market. I'm surprised that it hasn't been quicker, but then again,
And we sit down with, we've sat down with a few landlords, and we help them with an evaluation and giving them a real picture of what their property is really worth. Because sometimes landlords have one thing in their mind, and then when we sit down with them and we show them what the numbers are, and they're like, "Oh, that's what my building's really worth." So we run into that scenario a lot.
And I feel bad. It's like, listen, everyone wants to think that their building's a beauty queen. I always say, everyone thinks that their building's a 10, and sometimes like you got to take reality of that. If you don't have to listen, I've been in commercial sales a very long time, but I've also been on the other side of the table. I've been, I owned properties, I've bought and sold properties, I've developed properties. Like I've seen all facets of it. So, I can't say that I was like when they passed these laws in 2019, I didn't take a freaking minute and I was like, this is my life's work. Yeah. And they just tossed it in the garbage. So now it's like I understand what building owners can go through when they see what the value is of the reality. And I hope that, unfortunately, I feel like sometimes you got to the pendulum's got to swing the other way. And New York City, another thing New York City relies on a lot is transfer taxes. If you ever look at your title bill lately, it's crazy. Just one fucking bang. It's like this fee, that fee, this fee. It's like, you want a glass of water, $75. It's constant. Yeah. So what do they rely on? They rely on transfer taxes. They rely on people doing business. So
they need transactions.
So if you crush transaction volume and you crush sales volume and the ability for people to actually do business and buy and sell, you're only hurting yourself, because they rely on, hundreds of millions of dollars a year in, transaction fees to get, business done. And that goes to then title guys get hurt, appraisers get hurt. All these other guys and people, bankers women too, all of this, the transaction volume goes down. All these other people that relied on, transaction volume being healthy in New York City, whether it's 2.5% to 3.5% of the building stock that trades, every year, now, they're getting crushed. So it's hurting everybody. That's the whole point that they got to see is this is the small person here. This is the small business owner here. This is the young student that graduated college that now can't afford anything in New York City, because you have people that, lived in rent stabilized apartments that they don't means test, that make $2 million a year and live in a loft for $600 a month because, no one thinks that they should, look to see what their income is. So, there's such a disconnect. That's why I think it's good to talk about it, because people only hear one side sometimes, or they have had personal experiences on either side that kind of, make their mind feel one way. And that's why it's good to have a conversation.
So where do you feel that we are in the current state of the market, of the commercial real estate market? And where are we heading in the next 12 months? I know you don't have a crystal ball.
I wish I did.
I wish I did. You know when I wish I had a crystal ball?
2010.
I saw this meme on social media that is like, in 2006, why was I in 7th grade and not buying buildings? I wish I had a crystal ball back then, and I would have picked up all these buildings in maybe like Bushwick for $150,000, $200,000 in the early 2000s, which are worth millions of dollars now in Bed-Stuy and anywhere in Brooklyn, really. But I know you don't have a crystal ball, but where do you see the market now and heading in the next 12 months? Give us your insight, because you're the legend. You're the industry expert. Tell us right now.
I think that the market is actually pretty strong in the mixed use, free market, even commercial stuff, warehouses, land. I think we've seen kind of like a revived market. Ooh,
the market is revived.
There are definitely, and I can speak to Brooklyn, South Brooklyn, in particular, that there's definitely strong interest. We have a couple of properties on the market right now, mixed use assets right now, and there's interest. There's solid interest, and I think that we're priced within reason. And I have to say, I think I'm not surprised they're good assets. A good asset will sell. And that's the thing about New York City, the New York City market. It is very resilient. So I do feel
New York, baby,
the, under $5 million, under $7 million investment sales market, I think is pretty healthy. I think the land market for high-end condo conversion is coming back. Hopefully, they'll reach an agreement for another 421A.
We got to talk about that too.
Okay.
What is 421A? What are tax abatements?
Another great round of applause for the fucking city to do
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
So they had this like really good program
to incentivize
developers through private and government funding to go ahead and put up new buildings, rental buildings, and you would get in return a tax abatement for if it was 20, 30, 35 years. There were different programs. And that was the incentive for developers to provide affordable housing for the city. And it was a 420 program.
They stopped it.
They just stopped it. They're like, no. And we're like,
this is why inventory is down and prices are up.
Why would you not still again, all the trades that relied on building affordable housing, you're just, beat now. And now you have land that had foundations in the ground. So if you had your foundation in the ground, you're up against the clock because you got to finish construction with a CO, I think.
June 2026.
Okay. So you got to build quick, right? And now you have interest rates that are very high on construction loans. So that didn't help. And then you have guys that were sitting there were like, all right, I have my land. I'm going to start to build. And the city's like, yeah, we're not going to do that. But no real alternative. So hopefully they'll decide to bring it back or, revive another program that could be used to help the city. Because it's you just all these small businesses that relied on even small buildings, even if you're putting up 12 units, 15 units, right? You got framers, you got sheetrockers, you got why would you stop something that was so good and beneficial?
Yeah.
I don't get it. It's everything was working really, really well. We didn't see any downsides. So
developers are looking at this right now and going, yeah, you tell them.
It's we'll just stop. It's ridiculous. It boggles the mind. Sometimes I'm
but there's good news because the market's kind of revived.
Yeah.
The market is a little strong in the commercial real estate market. And we have some listings on the market and the commercial aspect of end of it. And there's activity, there's offers, there's action.
Yeah, sure.
So,
and I think we're going to continue to see more of that. I think there's also, people are always moving to New York City. There's these microcosms of neighborhoods that, are always kind of seeing a pocket of strong activity, especially in Sunset Park, Bay Ridge, parts of South Brooklyn, in Marine Park. There's just, there's always people say, oh, everyone's going to move to Florida. Everyone's moving down south. But and as much as we complain, because I do complain about New York City and some things about New York City, just because it's it could be, and it was at one point so fucking good to be here, and there's such a good energy, and it's why did we take something good and crush it for no reason? Especially
but I also feel people leave and come back.
Now I feel people are you know what, skin cancer's on the rise, so I probably shouldn't lay in the sun in Florida all day long, and I'm bored and I want some action, and I'm gonna come back, or I'm gonna
a lot of people are coming back.
Yeah,
a lot of people are coming back, and it's leaving New York, forget about it.
Yeah, and I do feel there's an energy in New York City that
you can't get it anywhere.
You really can't get anywhere else. I don't care if you're in Boca Raton and listen, I love Boca. Trust me, I love Boca.
Yeah. New York's New York.
Not Boca in August, you sucking air, but Boca now, would be nice. But I decided to come back to work, so I'm not in Florida, but that's okay.
New York is New York, and it always will be, and it's a great place to buy. Because values have shown throughout history that they just continue to go up, and they will continue to go up.
There's definitely asset preservation here in New York City, where I really can't speak to the rest of the 49 states, but even in the worst of times, you're not going to have a vacancy rate of 20% or 30% in New York City. Again, COVID was different, but you're not going to see.
But even after COVID, the comeback was insane.
And also, too, it's even if interest rates go up, they go down, there's still inherent value. There's preservation of capital where, if you buy a strip center and
that preservation of
capital, that's what people move their money to the city. because they know that if they have to get it out at any point in time, there's going to be a buyer for it.
100%.
And you just don't really see that in a lot of other pockets of the country.
100%. This was fun. This was great. I want to end this with the most important question, I think. You've been in the game for a while. I've been in the game for a while, but I always feel like I'm always learning. And even on this sit down, I learned a lot too. And I want to know from you, what do you think is the secret to your success in business, in life, and in commercial real estate? And we'll end it with that.
Oh God.
I'll put you on the spot right now.
Yeah, that's definitely. I think when you start young, so I'm gonna give you a perspective, like when I start, like, you gotta love this business. So part of being successful in something is that you inherently have to love it. Because if you don't love what you do, I don't think you could ever really truly succeed. At least in this business. I think I learned from a lot of different people and a lot of great people. And I had very strong mentors that I sought out. So if I always felt like I wanted to be around someone that like I admired and that I respected and I can learn from. And when I was young, I just kind of sat back and I listened. And I listened and I watched and I saw how people moved and how things were done. And I think you got to have flexibility. You never know like where this market's going, what's going to happen in the world. But if you have the flexibility to move with the times, to learn, to be dedicated to what you do, and we're in the people business. A big part of our business is like, regardless of what the asset is, and I think this is a testament too to like residential real estate, right? No matter what company you're with or, where you came from, people want to sell real estate, or when they want to sell their real estate, they want to sell with someone they like and that they trust. And I feel like that's the most important, is that the relationships that like I've developed, that I've tried to cultivate, that are with people that like I trust, they trust me. And at the end of the day, when we're going to work on a transaction together, it's because they want me to be involved. And I love that. And I love that about them. And I take my crazy clients with my good clients, with my clients that are like out of state too. Like I embrace all of it because I always have a learning experience with every transaction. So I think that those are my points. Be dedicated, love what you do, have flexibility, learn from people you respect and admire, and don't count your money.
Until the closing.
Until the closing and the check clears.
Woo! This was fun. Thank you so much. Good. Thank you guys for watching the Market is Revived podcast. Episode 1 in the books. Can't wait for the next episode. This was awesome. A lot of great information. Thank you guys again. Let's get it!
Thank you for having me.